With pressure washing GPUs back in the news to clean up used video cards, we're now seeing a whole other issue, which is some YouTube videos. I'm seeing this reported by WCCF Tech, but it looks like the original information is coming from some YouTube videos by Iskander Sousa and Paulo Gomez, if I pronounced that right. Sorry if I butchered it. Anyway, crypto miners using paint to deceive buyers into purchasing used GPUs as new. Now, it's one thing if you know you're buying a used GPU and the various risks that go with that, but it's a whole other level of sketchy to sell a GPU as new when it's actually used. And they're going as far as painting parts of the board, the RAM chips, things like that, to hide their, discoloring and obvious long-term use, like hiding the tint on the memory dies and the GPUs, things like that. Now, hopefully if you're buying from reputable places, this isn't too much of an issue, but it does look like the YouTube channel Tech Lab reported a similar topic, said they discovered used graphics cards being sold out of Brazil as new cards from a brand called A Fox. And so basically just a heads up that those used mining GPUs might be being tried to be passed off as new cards, so just be careful what you're getting. Now, again, it's a lot of used cards are fine. There are definitely some that are broken, but it's completely wrong to try to sell a used card as if it was new. That's a whole other thing. Now, in another buyer beware consumer, just get some info out there note, if you bought a Samsung 990 Pro SSD, you might want to check on its health status, because there was this article posted a few days ago at this point, I don't think it's been a week yet, by at NeoWin, where the author had just tested his health of his Samsung 990 Pro, noticed it had already dropped to 98%, which sounds like a good healthy amount, but that's only a very, very short use time without much data written to it. Now, a lot of people know that SSDs do have a limited lifespan. You can only write data so much, but they're, given a certain amount of read and writes that they should be able to handle. So you get an idea of how many years you should be okay with it, depending on how heavily you use it, that kind of thing. Well, he's noticed it dropped to 98% quickly, and then after a couple more days, all the way down to 95%. Now, this is completely out of the norm, especially given how the the SSD was being used. Tried to get an RMA with Samsung. They told him everything's fine. He posted the article. There were a lot of comments on the article with other people saying they're having similar issues. So basically, the story's been updated several times by now, saying that not only did they get confirmation from a lot of other people, one of them even saying, at least on Twitter, that his 990 Pro has dropped to 64% health with only 2 terabytes being written, which is absolutely not okay. And saying that Samsung's RMA division has reached out now to offer to replace the SSD or to try to replicate the problem, but they're only doing that after this article drew more attention, which is, it's good that they're trying to help now, but anyway, should have done that the first time around. And then they're saying that it got picked up on the hardware subreddit, with a lot of other users on this Reddit post also reporting that their 990 Pros are showing the health dropping lower than expected, given the amount of use time and writes and all of that. So all I'm going to say here is, it's unclear at this point exactly how bad the situation is. I'm just saying that if you have a 990 Pro and haven't checked on its health, it might be worth doing that. And then if you were considering buying a 990 Pro, at least personally, I would wait until there's more information about what's going on here. And if there's actually something wrong with the drives, or if they're just misreporting their health, or if this is a widespread issue or just small. Seems like a lot of people, like I said, this Reddit post is full of it, reporting mine's at 95% now after a few weeks. While my old Samsung 850 EVO is still at 97% after 8 years, right? Hoping it's a reporting error, because again, we don't know exactly what the issue is. Now, speaking of interesting SSD news, so the game Forspoken came out now on PC, and now I know a lot of people aren't very interested in this game, but from a technology standpoint, it's the first game we have with DirectStorage in it, which should speed up load times by kind of bypassing a lot of, I think, usually stuff goes through the CPU to the GPU, and this goes more directly to the GPU from the SSD. Now, I'm seeing this videocards.com article reporting on results from a YouTube video that's in German, so I couldn't understand much of the actual video. But we do have this slide, which seems interesting, but I'm going to say I think this might need more follow-up. I don't know if I will have the time to test this myself or even enough SSDs and all that to do this kind of testing. But this is an interesting result, but I wouldn't just like freak out about it until there's further confirmation on a wider variety of hardware and systems. But this seems to be pointing to a slower SSD actually offering better GPU performance in-game when using DirectStorage. Now, why would that be the case? Well, the test system here is an RTX 4090 with an Intel 12900K. So what they varied here was the SSD. They went from a SATA SSD, which will be much slower, to a PCIe Gen 3 SSD and a PCIe Gen 4 SSD, which can grab the data much faster. And while the 1% lows seem pretty similar on all of these, the average frame rate was higher on the RTX 4090, whereas it was very similar on the Gen 3 and Gen 4 SSDs, but lower. Now, if I was going to speculate at what could be causing that, the only reason I would think of that the slower SSD would have better gaming performance, again, we're not talking load times. To be clear, we're not talking load times. The good thing about the DirectStorage, it should make the load times better on the faster SSD. But could that negatively impact the GPU performance? Because maybe we're getting more data streamed to the GPU, and now the GPU has to deal with more data. Again, I'm just speculating off of that data. It's just an interesting result. But as of now, it's just this one outlet reporting this. Like I said, maybe I'll have time over the weekend. Remember, I mean, some of you guys don't know, but I have a full-time job as a teacher. Like, I do a lot of testing on this channel, but it's limited how much time I have to do that. So maybe I'd have time to test over the weekend, download Forspoken, see what's going on here. If I could replicate this, I do have I think one of my PCs does have all three of these types of drives installed in it. But again, no guarantees on if I'll have time to see if I can replicate this. Interesting thing, though. I would say overall, even if there is a bit of a performance loss, the 1% lows didn't suffer, so your overall gameplay would probably feel pretty similar without any worse, like, big stutters or anything like that, it seems like. And getting insanely fast load times and less pop-in of texture, better streaming of all the graphics elements does seem like a good thing. Anyway, speaking of new technology, we're seeing Nvidia's Gerardo Delgado tweeting that Discord is rolling out its AV1 streaming updates for support of the RTX 40 series GPUs. Now, it's unclear, especially since he's kind of an Nvidia guy posting this, I think, whether the AV1 support for Intel or AMD is also being rolled out. That's a question mark. Maybe it's just the Nvidia one at this time, not sure. But it's saying that's being rolled out, and it'll slowly populate to all users. So if you're not seeing it yet, maybe it takes time to get to you. With AV1, you'll be able to stream up to 4K 60 with Nitro at 8 megabits per second. Now, he says that now there's the issue here then of what if people are watching the stream without the ability to decode AV1? Because, right, you have the hardware encoding, which is new on the newer platforms. We've had AV1 decoding for a while, but someone on an older system or incompatible system might not have that. So it says Discord uses peer-to-peer streaming, so they will check if the people in your channel can view AV1, and if so, it'll use AV1, and if someone joins that can't decode it, it will switch automatically to H.264 so everyone can see it. And so really what this is highlighting is that, well, AV1 encoding should be a great thing for streaming because it should look better at low bit rates than H.264. There's still all these compatibility issues. Can people encode it? Can people decode it? And are the streaming platforms supporting it? but at least Discord does seem to be rolling it out, at least for Nvidia support at the moment. Now, jumping into some AMD news, a lot of people liked the More Power Tools program, which gave them a lot of control over their GPUs for a lot of overclocking, things like that. And this was popular on the 6000 series from AMD. But I'm seeing this, our hardware post quoting the Hardware Lux forums, basically saying that More Power Tools will not be supported on the RDNA 3 GPUs because there's no way to get access to the firmware, power limits, and other features that it had access to with the previous generation of GPUs. The direct quote here says, maybe one or the other has read my last post on the MPT thread at Igor, but whatever, not whatever, jeez. Mainly Goopsterg and his contacts have now come to some conclusions. Of course, Vey has already determined his part, and we actually all agree pretty much everything is double and triple secured. We would have to rewrite firmware and drivers, and we can't do that. Not even under Linux. So there will be no MPT for RDNA 3, and yeah, they're not super happy about that. So anyway, so I think that's bad news for the more hardcore overclocking type people. Now, in AMD news, AMD is posting a new article talking about the performance they're offering on their 7000 series and 6000 series GPUs, and they're also showing that at like current street prices, the prices you can actually buy them for at retailers, rather than necessarily MSRPs, although the 7000 series does seem to kind of be their MSRPs. I mean, you can buy them for those prices too. But they're showing you can get a 6950 XT for $699. Now, what I think is interesting about this is in their own slide, they're showing the poor value of the 7900 XT. If you're curious about the games they're apparently using the 6 games: Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, Callisto Protocol, Grand Theft Auto 5, Apex Legends, Valorant, and Overwatch 2. So that's what the data set is apparently. But they're showing at 4K, that's also why the frame rates are so high at 4K. I mean, you're using, other than Callisto Protocol, you're usually using mostly old games or, old-ish and, esports titles with high frame rates. Anyway, but you're seeing 180 FPS on the 7900 XT for $900 and 168 FPS average in the same suite of games at $699 on the 6950 XT. For those of you who don't math in your head, that means it's a 29% price increase for 7% more performance on AMD's own chart here, going from here to here. So anyway, there's that. They're also highlighting, again, the good performance of the 6800 series and all of that. They also have a cost per frame graph, which is kind of, it's a frames per dollar graph. And so here, the gray bar is showing the cost per frame. And you can see that, frames per dollar. I keep saying that backwards. So higher is actually better on the gray bar. So we can see that when you get into cards like the 6800 XT and the 6800 at these $500 to $580 price points, you're getting significantly more frames per dollar compared to their newer GPUs. And again, this is their own data. It's actually, they're showing the 6700 XT as a true standout out of the pack. So anyway, according to AMD's own data, their 6000 series, especially the 6700 XT through 6800 XT range, is really offering more frames per dollar than their newer GPUs. The newer GPUs do offer higher absolute performance, but anyway, there you go. Now, in a little bit of interesting Nvidia, so you guys can probably hear I'm losing my voice. You guys might have noticed I didn't put out as many videos this week. I've been battling a bit of a cold. Anyway, we're seeing at IT Hardware, which is not in English, so I'm going to swap over to a bit of a summary of their data in a Tom's Hardware article. What we're seeing here is, a while back, we saw that the 3060 Ti would get a refreshed version with GDDR6X memory instead of GDDR6. But this has not been widely available in a lot of markets, and so we hadn't really seen this tested out. Well, this test is testing the GDDR6X version versus a non-6X version, right, GDDR6 version of the 3060 Ti, and against the 3070. Now, the one thing to keep in mind here, though, is that the clock speeds on their 6X version are higher than their clock speeds on their 3060 Ti version, or sorry, are lower, meaning there's a bigger factory overclock on their non-X version. So in their overall results here, summarized in this Tom Hardware article, you see that the 6X version is only slightly faster, but it is faster. It's also not as heavy of a factory overclock. So it's actually showing that the 6X version made up for, and then some, the better factory overclock on this Asus TUF Gaming 3060 Ti without the 6X memory. But it was definitely not enough to catch up to an RTX 3070. It was still a bit slower there. So interesting results. Although again, keep in mind the clock speeds here are not an apples to apples comparison. Now, if you're interested in how GPUs have been selling, we have Tech Epiphany on Twitter once again, quote, reporting Mind Factory sales. Now, Mind Factory is, I think, the biggest or one of the biggest GPU sellers in Germany, but this is certainly not the whole market. But it did have some interesting results, with the 4070 Ti actually leading this. And again, this is just this week. This is just this week of sales, okay, to be clear. So in this week of sales, we saw the 4070 Ti at Mind Factory, not worldwide, right? Right? This is just one data sample, actually being the top seller, with the 3060 as second place and the 6700 XT from AMD in third place, the 3060 Ti in fourth. And we're not seeing a 7000 series until the XTX version coming in here in fifth place. And then we can see the 4090s way down here. XT is even lower. So interesting results. Now, some of this is probably influenced by pricing, what's available, this particular market, how many units they have available, and at what prices. But if you go ahead and look at the kind of average results that Tech Epiphany is giving us here, we're seeing AMD sold 1,665 units at an average sale price of 656 euros, and Nvidia sold 2,255 units this week at an average sale price of 807, and the overall share being 57% versus 42% basically. Intel only with 20 units sold at 0.5% of the sales, average sale price at 270. So very interesting. But again, keep in mind, this is not worldwide. This is not even all of Germany. This is one retailer's results. So it's interesting, but don't overgeneralize here. Now, there was an interesting Der Bauer video. This is just kind of a warning. If you're interested in cooling your GPU with liquid metal, make sure you understand the types of metal that it can bond with successfully without causing damage. I'll just point you to my video description with my links if you want more info on this, because I'm looking at the time of the video and when I need to wake my kids up for school and get ready to go to work myself. But I will do a quick follow-up of speaking of things you can use to as a thermal solution on your GPU. There's an interesting post here at Computer Base, which is in not English. So I'll look at the video cards article, which has translated it. But basically, if you're interested in which makes a better GPU thermal compound, ketchup, cheese, or potatoes, you can now answer those questions. So again, we have this article, but with the results translated. You could see how, actual Arctic TP2 or, whatever performs. The GPU temperatures we got, at what point it thermal throttles. But you can also compare that to a potato or, ketchup. It looks like ketchup was much more effective than toothpaste. So that's maybe a bit of a surprise. Now, please don't actually use any of these silly items, but I thought this was a fun article. Now, do keep in mind they were testing on a 30-watt GPU, so the overall cooling they needed to perform was not very high. But I thought it was an interesting article. Now, here's another interesting one, but I'm going to say this is probably just a mistake. But AMD's Ryzen 7000X3D series has been listed as unlocked for overclocking on AMD's own website. These are screenshots. As of January 5th, it was not listed as unlocked for overclocking. As of January 23rd, when the screenshot was taken and is being reported by videocards.com, it says unlocked for overclocking, yes. Now, what's going on here? This is the X3D CPUs, which should be coming out at some point in February, according to AMD, but they have not given us an actual release date. But they've cautioned that it's not unlocked for like manual overclocking. It does support PBO and curve optimization, which is some kind of like automatic overclocking tools. So either this isn't meaning what we would think unlocked for overclocking means, or it's a mistake, or they changed something. But their product page already mistakenly listed February 14th as the release date, and then that was taken back by AMD and said that that was a mistake. So I would just be careful at this point reading, because I've seen some articles headlined like, you can overclock the X3D, confirmed by AMD. Slow down, it is on the AMD page, but they've already made mistakes on their page. We don't have a release date, we don't have pricing, all we've been told is February. So we'll see what happens. I'm very interested to see the overall gaming performance on those. Now, if you're interested in cooling your AMD Ryzen 7000 CPUs, but you need to do it in low profile, there's a press release here being published at videocards.com, but it's a press release from Noctua showing off their new low profile Noctua coolers. Again, you could look at the link in the description if you're interested in more info on that, but Noctua with their low profile cooling there. And if you're interested in buying a Ryzen 7000 CPU, the Jedi Survivor game bundle is now live. You just have to make sure you're buying it from a retailer that is supported in this program. And again, link will be in the description if you want to check it out. And it does support the entire Ryzen 7000 lineup. As of this point, notice no X3D chips listed, so unclear whether they would be added into this deal if it's still live when they eventually launch, or if it's just for the non-3D versions, which would be my assumption, because I think they're trying to boost sales here a little bit since sales have been a bit low. Also, just a bit of a reminder that their Ryzen 5000 series game bundle for Company of Heroes 3 is still live at this point. And that's on the entire Ryzen 5000 lineup, getting Company of Heroes 3, so keep that in mind. Now, as sort of a bit of a weird and interesting Intel Arc info, Gunnir brand has an Intel Arc A380 desktop GPU being apparently listed in a mobile MXM form factor. Now, the MXM form factor, I'm not as big on laptop GPUs, but I think this is not very popular anymore, not widely supported anymore, but you could pop in a mobile GPU on the MXM standard. And it's looking like Gunnir is offering the Arc A380 desktop GPU on this mobile form factor, which I think is interesting. It looks like it's on sale now for $18.99 RMB, which would translate to about $280, and that's after a bit of a discount. So interesting if you're interested in that form factor, I guess. In other Intel news, they did release a graphics driver, with the highlight being the day one support for Forspoken, with a couple of other fixed issues regarding Plague Tale Requiem, freezing during gameplay, and Need for Speed Unbound, with some box corruptions. Those seem to be fixed. Few other fixes, but still a wide variety of known issues. But again, it's good to see Intel actually, getting a day one driver out there for a major game release. Nvidia, of course, also released a day one driver for Forspoken. Also, this driver is providing better support for the DLSS 3 technology that will be coming soon to Marvel's Midnight Suns, Hitman 3, and Deliver Us Mars. And this is also some DLSS support for Dead Space and Forspoken, some other fixed issues and things you could look into, and some known issues. Now, AMD also launched a Forspoken Day 1 driver, but unless I'm misunderstanding this, they only did so for their 7000 GPUs. Because their new driver with the Forspoken release notes does appear to only be compatible with the AMD 7000 series. So unless I just missed it on their website somewhere, AMD's 6000 series did not get a day one optimized driver for Forspoken, which I thought was interesting. This also means, if I'm correct, that AMD's 6000 series GPUs have not had a new driver update since like the first half of December. It's only been 7000 series updates, and they have not moved to a driver version that just, is compatible with both lines. You have to make sure you're getting the one for either 7000 or 6000. So that's interesting. We'll see where that goes. Now, in other Intel Arc GPU news, there's according to CompuBench website, we're seeing reports of a interesting GPU that we wouldn't be expecting, because it has 16 Xe cores, but so far only the Mobile Arc A550M has 16 Xe cores, and that's based on a different GPU than the one that we're seeing listed here. So it's a little unclear what exactly this is, and this is not a great gaming benchmark. So you can see that it's, whatever this is, it's 42% slower than the A770 in this benchmark, but this benchmark is not really a gaming benchmark. I'll move my fat head out of the way. Not really a gaming benchmark. But I'm just throwing that out there, that maybe we're going to see something else coming from Intel soon. And in a quick few last notes, Xbox gaming revenue is apparently down 13%, although Game Pass subscriptions are growing. It looks like both hardware and software sales are down this year. Part of that could be attributable to less first-party releases from Microsoft this year compared to last year at this time. We're also seeing League of Legends reporting that their source code has been stolen in a ransomware attack, and they will not be paying to get it back. And they're warning that new cheats may result because they could have the source code to League of Legends. Probably an older build and whatnot, but still could cause some issues out there. It does not look like user data was leaked in this breach, though. But feel free to dig further into this article if you may be impacted by that or you're interested in that. And we're also seeing a report from some analysts saying that Intel's hurting the PC market by flooding it with products during a sales slump where there's not a lot of interest, and they're accusing them of just wanting to take up shelf space with Intel products to hurt competitors more than they're hurting themselves, I guess. And this is according to a Bernstein analyst. Anyway, like I said, you could dig further into this, but I've got to go get my kids up for work. I was going to talk a little more there, but I hope all of you have an excellent day.